Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you guys are starting to move in the right direction in terms of feeling good. I know we're not quite past the 48 hours yet, but we are almost there. And we've got a quick turnaround this week anyway. So we got to be moving past it. We got to be thinking about something else. We got to be thinking about something else besides what happened on Sunday. But I want to talk a little bit about one of the subplots of this season for the Seahawks. I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that are undisputably and definitely and clearly making this team worse, holding this team back. I'm talking about penalties. I want to talk a little bit about the Seahawks and penalties. So, Julian Love did a presser earlier today, and he was asked about penalties because, for those of you who don't know, the Seahawks lead the league in penalties right now. Combined, offense, defense, special teams, mash it all together, the Seahawks lead the league in penalties. And he basically said it's the refs. He basically said the refs are to blame. They throw flags on the Seahawks that they don't throw on other teams, is the implication here. The exact quote is the refs are going to, they know who we are. Now, he did go on to say the required stuff, which is we have to be more careful, we have to be more accountable, etc., etc. But the undertone here is the referees are to blame for these penalties. And before I get into the meat of this video, I want to say there's always going to be a little bit of truth to that. The referees miss calls all the time. Nowadays, it seems like they miss calls more than ever. I think a big reason why is because we as fans see 8 million different angles of every single play in high definition. So when they miss a call, we are all over it as fans. We see it. We see it easily. We see it obviously. And it's like, wow, how did they miss that? Because they saw it once in regular speed and we saw it 8 million times in slow motion. Like, just as an example, think about pass interference. Just think about pass interference as a call, where we look at every pass interference call under a microscope, and the referee gets one shot in regular speed from whatever angle he happens to be standing at. If it looks like PI in real time, he's probably going to call it, and a decent chunk of the time he's going to be wrong. That is just something that the NFL accepts as the cost of doing business. So I think that has more to do with it than incompetent officiating. But regardless, there are definitely bad calls, missed calls, unnecessary calls. And Sunday, I said it. I said it after the game ended. We definitely have a leg to stand on. We have two legs to stand on when it comes to blaming the refs for the way that game went. They had a big say in how that game went. The pass interference in the end zone alone would have given us a leg to stand on. Alone gives us an argument to say, hey, the referees had a lot to do with the outcome of this game. That was a third down. And then there were some other bad calls too. The no call on Aaron Donald when he clearly roughed Geno Smith 3 different ways from Sunday. No call when the NFL has made it very clear that they're trying to crack down on that stuff. So that game, sure, you want to pin that game on the officials. You've got two very healthy legs to stand on. But I want to take a look at the big picture here. I want to take a look at the actual breakdown of the issue here. And I want to ask people a simple question. So the Seahawks lead the league in penalties with 76. So that is 7.6 penalties per game on average. Obviously, Sunday was an extreme. They had 12, which was one of the highest totals they've had in years and one of the highest totals any team has had this season. So that was just a particularly bad game, not helped by a couple of the bad calls. But let's big picture this for a second here. The Seahawks lead the league in penalties with 7.6 per game. How many of those penalties, 76 total, how many of those penalties are we saying are illegitimate, are unfair, are should not have been called? Like, let's say the number is something like, do you think it's 10%? Do Do you think it's 10%? I mean, think about a lot of those penalties. A lot of those penalties are illegal hands to the face when, yeah, you can see the guy's hands go up to his face. A lot of them are offsides where, yeah, you can see the guy move across the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped. A lot of them are false starts where, yeah, the guy moves before the ball gets snapped. A lot of them are intentional grounding where, yeah, you can see that there's no receiver in the area. A lot of them are pretty clear and obvious, straight up, easy calls. Illegal block in the back. Holding. Now, holding is always going to be subjective because there's holding on every play. We know this. And sometimes they choose to call it, sometimes they choose not to. That's always going to be a funky gray area. But think about most of those calls. Most of them are clearly correct. And of the ones that aren't clearly correct, most of them are debatable. So what do you think the number is? How many of these 76 penalties are just plain unfair and just plain bad calls? Probably like 6 or 7, right? Let's say it's 7. Let's say we shouldn't have 76 penalties. Let's say we should have 69, because 69 is a great number anyway. So let's say we should have 69 penalties. Okay, that would put us behind Cardinals, Cowboys, Bears, Bills, Packers, and Panthers. And then tied with a couple teams. So still in the top 8, right? That's where this whole thing breaks down. We're arguing effectively, unless you really think the referees have it out to get us, unless you really think there's some big conspiracy that is manifesting itself for multiple penalties every single game we play. What we are arguing is not that we should be that instead of being the most penalized team in the league, that we should be one of the most penalized teams in the league. We should be, instead of 2 ahead of the Cardinals and Cowboys, we should be 5 behind. Do you see what I'm saying here? This is still a very heavily penalized team, and guess what? When that happens, yeah, officials do start to look for stuff that they might not look for with another team. Like, Woolen's a great example. He's committed 2 major illegal use of hands to the face penalties in the last month. You think the referees aren't aware of that? You think they aren't going to, for the rest of the season, go, we better keep an eye on that guy because we know he's doing this a lot. We know he's doing this in key situations. We got to be on top of it. Yeah, they're going to do that. You think they're not all over some of these other players that are committing a lot of penalties? Like look at Metcalf. Yeah, Metcalf gets penalties he should not get because of his reputation. But how did he get that reputation in the first place? So this is where I have a hard time following the argument all the way through. Like Sunday's a great example. We had 12 penalties on us. Let's say 4 of them are crap. 4 of them were bad, which isn't even the right number. But let's say it's 4. That means we still had 8. And 8 a game would put us on pace to lead the league by even more than we do now. So those things are still helping us lose. Even if you want to say there was some unfair stuff in there. And realistically, the number of unfair penalties on us was not 4 in that game. It was probably more like you could maybe the PI, and then you can probably find 1 or 2 other calls in there. So the actual number is probably 2 or 3. So you're still doing so much, one of the most of any teams in the NFL, to hurt your case as a team. That is why this kind of a sentiment, I can't really follow it because it's, even if you take away the stuff that's not right, the Seahawks would still be among the league leaders. And that's still not okay for this team. Because here's the thing. We're not that good. We don't have the talent to overcome this. Let me show you guys a little bit something here. I ranked every team in the NFL. Let's go by points per game. That's probably a little bit better anyway. The teams that allow the most points per game, and then the teams that allow the fewest points per game. The Seahawks are in the bottom half. So you can see some of these teams near the like Washington's currently got the worst defense. They're allowing almost 28 points a game. Seahawks are at 22, right? There are more teams ahead of them here than there are behind them. I think they're about 19th in points per game, if I recall correctly. If you were to rank this all out, they're about 19th. I think I have that number right. So they are below average in scoring defense, all right? Now think about the Legion of Boom defenses that were number 1. Those teams committed a ton of penalties too. Those defenses committed a lot of penalties. They usually led the league in penalties. Guess what? It was worth it. For those defenses, it was worth it because there would be other plays they had where they didn't get the penalty thrown on them, where they got away with a little something, and it all evened out to where they could eat the penalties and still win almost all other games because they were that good. The penalties were the cost of doing business, and it was an acceptable cost of doing business. But we're leading the league in penalties to be 19th in defense. By the way, if you want to drag the offense into this, in terms of scoring, we're 16th. We are 16th in scoring offense. So, on no front is this worth it. In no area is leading the league in penalties or, hypothetically, not being singled out by officials and being one of the top 7 or top 8 most penalized teams. It's not paying off. And that comes from Pete. I'm sorry, it does. It does. This mentality around penalties comes from Pete because it worked for him for so long, where he had the greatest defense in the league and they could commit a ton of penalties and they would still produce, still win. So that mentality exists here today. And this is a problem now. This has become a big problem. We are seeing the same number of penalties, but nowhere near the amount of production. Again, this defense is in the bottom half of the league right now, right about 19th. So where's the payoff? Where's the business that this is the cost of doing? It doesn't exist. This defense is below average. The offense is average. So, yeah, Sunday was BS. I will never argue otherwise. Sunday, the nature of the calls and no calls that went against the Seahawks was ridiculous. But overall, that is not the story that needs to be told right now. See you guys later. Go Hawks.